first time we saw FromVille, I'm sure all of us would agree that, on the surface, the place looks like a quaint little town surrounded by woods in all directions. The long meandering road, the little buildings, and the Victorian colony house all just accentuate the aesthetic of a lovely town. It looks safe, but that story changes completely when the sun goes down. The FromVille is afflicted with many supernatural entities that have shown up one by one throughout our journey from Season 1. And let's be honest, they're all shocking. Whether you're an old fan or one of the newer members of the ever-growing From Fanclub, I think today's video would suit your taste either way. In today's video, we at Marvelous Videos will give you a master list of all the supernatural entities at play in FromVille, from already established ones like the creatures who come out when the sun goes down, to popular speculations and even a bonus feature of who we think might show up by the end of the season. So get your talismans out and lock all the doors and windows. It's about to get spooky. Up first on our list we have, but before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Please, just maybe I can come in.
The creatures. These humanoid monsters were the first threat introduced to us when we started Season 1. And while over the seasons, the threats have definitely increased in intensity, I'd have to say that out of all the threats in FromVille, the creatures are my number one. I think all of us older fans got hooked on the show because of these creatures. The way the showrunners decided to introduce us to this threat is truly a masterpiece. I genuinely love the scene where the grandma creature stands in front of Megan's window, telling the young girl how she's so cold and lonely. As an audience member, I didn't find those gentle statements out of the blue because she's a grandma, but there was just something off about her, you know? Then my adult brain kicked in full gear and I realized that this woman was on the first floor window, which meant that woman was no rickety grandma. And of course, soon after, we see the aftermath of Megan opening the window. This one scene gives us all the information that we need to know about the creatures without any information dump. The creatures look like normal humans, and they're very persuasive and believable when they speak. They really want the townsfolk to open the windows or the doors to let them in, because something is stopping them from breaking in, which we later learn to be the talismans. And when one unfortunate soul falls for the tricks, the aftermath is gruesome, bloody, and frankly devastating. We get all of that information from just that one scene. That's the best way anyone could have explained the main threat at play, and I just can't appreciate the show don't tell approach enough. As the episodes roll in, we learn more tidbits about the creatures. They cannot be stopped by anything, not even bullets. They consider hunting the townsfolk a mere game, and since they know people don't have anywhere else to go, they don't even bother giving chase. They just follow people around, looking like they're out on a leisurely walk with a creepy smile until they get their hands on one of the victims. Their ability to mimic other humans is so good that even as an audience, I'm sure we were lulled into a false sense of security at first glance. They are creatures of routine, and somehow they manage to learn everything about the people they are stalking. They love psychologically tormenting their victims using their own fears and traumas against them. Throughout the 3 seasons, we've seen so many creatures. But some of them deserve a shout out because of the stellar performances by the actors and how they've changed the course of the story as a whole. First up on the list, we have Jasmine, the female creature played by Molly Dunsworth. She managed to manipulate one of the colony house members into falling in love with her by using his loneliness. He would leave her flowers on the porch, and she would bring them with her when she came to meet him at night. They would talk through the window, and she always managed to appease Kevin's emotional needs. Her manipulation tactic worked so well that Kevin threw his survival instincts out the window when he opened it to let her in. Obviously, this happened on the night everyone in Colony House was celebrating the anniversary of Fatima's arrival in town, and this eventually led to the Colony House massacre. Next we have, you guessed it, Smiley. Jamie Maguire is the talk of the town for his brutal portrayal of Smiley, and you know what? He deserves all the credit. He took the creature's role and owned it. I genuinely can't look at the actor and not think of Smiley. While the actions of Smiley in the Colony House Massacre definitely brought the creature some highlight, I personally really like the scene in Season 2 when Smiley goes inside the bus. He plays around with the steering wheel and turns on the lights, and you can almost see that despite being this supernatural entity who lures people in to eviscerate them, he's curious about whatever he's seeing in front of him. For just a second, you could almost believe that Smiley was this time traveler from the 70s who was pleasantly surprised by the newer machinery on the bus. But then that little moment is destroyed when he slices up the elderly couple hiding in the bus. I think we all know why Smiley made the list, right? The fact that in Season 2, Boyd managed to kill off Smiley, who seemed to be like the leader of these creatures, definitely got us all pumped. Up until now, the creatures seemed pretty invincible. But now, suddenly, one of them died. That is a huge deal. This incident gave us 2 clues about the town. The creatures can be killed, which is great news. Boyd's bloodworms are something to be scared of because they literally took down an impossible threat, which is even more bad news. With the whole RV incident, where the creatures refused to get close to Boyd, Donna, Jim, and Randall only for the music box to start playing, the hierarchical system of the threats in town was confirmed. The main threat of Season 1 is now just the tip of the iceberg, and the deeper the townsfolk delve into it, the worse it's going to get for them. That was confirmed when the 3rd season premiered. Yep, we're talking about the cowboy creature, played by Will Lang. Now listen, I know that in that particular scene, we had a lot of different creatures, but the cowboy creature grabbed my attention the most because of his actions. It was very clear that this guy right here planned out this whole sting operation of getting Boyd into the barn. And for what? Just as a petty revenge because Boyd said that this place could not break him, and the creature was having none of that. So they let out all the livestock, forcing Victor, Jade, Boyd, and Tin Chin to step out of the safety of their houses. When coincidentally Boyd and Tin Chin enter the barn, this cowboy creature ensures that Boyd gets an experience he will never forget. The group of creatures rip Tin Chin to shreds, making sure to make her death as painful as possible while forcing Boyd to watch. The whole sequence was brutal, and Harold Perrineau acted his ass off. He deserves an Emmy for that scene alone. This incident not only shook the whole town, it shook our faith in the safety of the characters too. The fact that these creatures can hear whatever they're saying is such a terrifying ordeal. Ever since Fatima's pregnancy was confirmed in the same episode Smiley was killed, several fans have been speculating if Fatima's baby is actually Smiley or if Fatima is turning into Smiley. I guess we'll just have to watch the last 4 episodes to find out. But personally, I wouldn't mind Smiley's return. The Boy in White. In a town where things are never what they seem to be at first glance, when I saw a random boy clad in white waving at Ethan, you can bet your bottom dollar I got suspicious. In the horror genre, the 2 most prominent cliches have to be a scary grandma and a scary kid. The number of times we've seen kids getting possessed, kids getting attacked, or kids getting trapped is way too many. So yeah, I was super duper suspicious of the Boy in White when we first saw him on screen. And I was right. As it turns out, the Boy in White is this mysterious entity who only shows up in front of a select few people. He's kind of like Jacob from Lost, another TV show produced by the same showrunners, which was super popular back in 2007. I do think that it's great that the Boy in White brought Victor and Ethan closer because Victor deserves friends, but I'm not too sure about the role the Boy in White plays. A lot of fans have theorized that the Boy in White specifically targets a child in each cycle of the town and tries to leech off of them, and until I have evidence proving otherwise, I'll lean towards this theory. When Victor survives the whole town massacre, he comes out of the root cellar and meets the Boy in White playing on a merry-go-round with the dog. Victor claimed that the Boy in White kept him company throughout those lonely years until one day when he simply stopped showing up. Then, after so many years, now that Ethan was in town, the Boy in White showed up again. Throughout the 3 seasons of the show, we've seen the Boy in White a handful of times. He seems like an entity who wants to help the the townsfolk and protect them against the main entity who controls the town. However, we have seen the Boy in White's suggestion invite more trouble for our townsfolk. I don't think anyone can forget that the Boy in White specifically told Sarah and Boyd that they would be safe if they stepped into the faraway tree, only for Boyd to end up in the dungeons of the music box monster and get bloodworms. In the Season 2 finale, we saw the Boy in White shove Tabitha off the lighthouse, claiming this is the only way. After that, Tabitha woke up in the real world. The Boy in White also showed up in the real world, waving at Tabitha, but when she went after him, he disappeared, and that didn't really help her. The Boy in White also shows up in Miranda's paintings, which means that this entity has been around for a really long time, even though he looks like a kid. Now, the question that we're left with is how the Boy in White relates to the town, and if this connection he shares would serve our characters any good. I don't think we'll get many answers regarding the Boy in White in this season, but one thing we know for sure, he is not an entity that is bound to the town. His powers, whatever they may be, transcend the town barriers, and it could very well be that this is an entity that works the best when bonded to a particular person. Since the Boy in White has shown up quite a few times with a dog, a lot of fans feel that maybe the dog is another avatar of the Boy in White, or at least a part of his team. Boyd ended up in the Talisman Cave when he followed the dog into the forest and got lost. Similarly, the dog showed up when Boyd got out of the dungeons the first time around. He followed the dog while trying to avoid the creatures and eventually found a safe haven in the Clary's canned goods truck, where Victor and Tabitha were already hanging out. So maybe all this time it was the Boy in White who was doing these things, but since Boyd is not one of the more spiritually sensitive townsfolk or more open to believing visions, maybe that's why he did not see the Boy in White in front of him and instead saw the dog. The Kimono Lady. Season 2 introduced us to several, and I mean several, supernatural entities at play in this town. While everyone was dealing with the music box monster and the 3 victims it had claimed, Elgin was dealing with his own demon, the Kimono Woman. Played by Shuoshin Fu, the Kimono Lady is an apparition who keeps haunting Elgin from the 2nd season on. Right before the music box monster's effect on the town was going in full swing, Julie suggested that Elgin could take a bath to calm his nerves. As he got in the bath, however, Elgin started hearing the haunting melody of the music box and soon saw a ghostly apparition looming over him, almost pushing him in the water. This apparition is the Kimono Lady. Since the first time she showed up and the music box melody was heard, we all assumed she was a part of the arsenal that the music box monster had to terrorize the townsfolk. However, when Season 3 came out, we realized things were not as simple. This drowned, sickly woman keeps haunting Elgin, even though Boyd defeated the music box monster. Her first appearance scared Elgin so much that he stopped sleeping for days. When he finally took a nap, the Kimono Lady showed up again, and after that, she started showing up when Elgin was awake. At first, she seemed like she wanted to harm Elgin, but now that we've seen her a few times on screen, as it turns out, she wants Elgin's help. She keeps promising Elgin that if he helps her out, she will save everyone in the town and bring them back home. However, how she plans to help Elgin save the day is still hidden. In the 6th episode of the 3rd season, the Kimono Lady appeared out of Fatima's picture that Elgin took. This made a lot of fans theorize that perhaps this apparition is a nod to the Japanese yokai Ame-ona. Since Fatima is pregnant, and these yokai are infamous for stealing babies, it would make sense if she was targeting Fatima for that. However, in that very episode, we learned that Fatima is not actually pregnant, as her fetus can't be seen on a USG. So now the question is, what does the Kimono Lady need Elgin's help for? Depending on the help that she wants, we would be able to decide if this lady is an evil entity or a helpful entity. But if you ask me, I think she's definitely evil. The visitor near the settlement. Although we're not yet to see another supernatural being in the 3rd season, keen-eyed fans have noticed Kenny mentioning the mysterious visitor near the settlement. Kenny told Boyd that he had heard someone walking around both times, and fans have been speculating who it could be. Now, could it be a creature? Yes, of course, it could be. The settlement is in the middle of the forest, and it doesn't seem to be that far away from the tunnel system that the creatures come out of, so it would make total sense if it were the creatures. However, fans believe that maybe whatever Kenny heard walking outside is actually not a two-legged being at all. Fans think that whatever Kenny heard out there are actually the spiders that we've seen referenced so many times. We've seen giant spiders in Victor's paintings, and with the amount of webs we saw in the Season 1 finale, that is definitely the work of a Shelob-sized spider. I mean, since all horror cliches from spooky doll to scary grandma to a stranger calling are being ticked off, why not add a giant spider to that list? The Music Box Monster. The biggest threat of the second season of From is the Music Box Monster. This malicious entity definitely had us all worried about the safety of our favorite characters. The bloodworms that Boyd ended up with, the ballerina with worms in her mouth that he kept hallucinating, and the cicadas that eventually claimed Julie, Mary, and Randall were all part of this Music Box Monster's ensemble. Although we do not have a face for this entity, from whatever Sarah heard when she went to the dungeon, we know one thing for a fact. This entity is sadistic. This entity was excited when the cicadas burnt Kenny. This entity was happy when Boyd brought it to town, and it planned on feeding off of the victim's pain and anguish. I've never been as scared of a faceless entity as I am of the Music Box Monster. While the second season finale showed us Boyd destroying the music box, smashing it into smithereens with his iron torch, the effect, rather the relevance of the Music Box Monster in this story is far from over. The victims, Randall, Julie, and Mary, went through something extremely traumatic. However, at first, none of them wanted to talk about it. As the episodes progressed, we learned a bit about what they went through when they were captured by the monster. Randall claimed that the visions he saw scared him to the point that he now believes death would be an easier way out. Julie smoked up with Elgin, and in that season, she confessed that her state of mind was not good. She did mention to Sarah that she feels like the town has claimed a piece of her in the second episode, but that didn't even scratch the surface of her condition. As she spoke with Elgin, we learned that she hears constant screaming in her head. She feels like hope is what's making them suffer so much, and her mother coming back from the outside world was just another ploy by the town to keep that hope of returning someday alive. So far, it seems like there's more to the Music Box Monster than we initially thought. Julie and Randall were seen venturing close to the ruins in the 7th episode promotion trailer. While Julie wanted to go back into the dungeon, Randall seemed unwilling to do so. Maybe in this season, we'll learn the true extent of the powers of the Music Box Monster. The voice over the radio. The biggest contribution Jim has made in the story so far has to be when he tries to make the radio work in the first season, followed by finding the food next to the lake in the 3rd season. The radio tower was a huge project, and it was a pretty logical step. Everyone in the town was super supportive about this new endeavor. I'm sure all of us were rather happy when we finally saw Jim getting a signal and hearing another voice on the other side. However, the hopes that we and Jim had were immediately crushed when the voice on the other side referred to him by his full name. Whoever was on the other side clearly knew who he was. And then the voice warned Jim about Tabitha digging the hole in the basement. Jim understandably left the equipment as it was and ran back to his wife, only to reach her after the basement had collapsed. Although we've heard the voice only once, whoever is behind this voice is definitely not another human being. Especially now that we're 3 seasons deep in the show, it wouldn't be surprising if this voice over the radio was the big bad evil that has been controlling everything around the town up until now. Otherwise, how could they have known that Tabitha was digging a hole? That's why when the telephone rang in the first episode of the 3rd season, we were pretty pumped. A lot of us expected that maybe this voice or entity would talk to Jim again. However, the person on the other side of the call was Older Thomas. We all know the heartbreaking tragedy that hit the Matthews family a year ago. The death of their infant had put a lot of strain on Jim and Tabitha's relationship, which bled into the relationship they shared with Julie as well. So we can understand why Julie is so tense and angry in the first season after learning that she had to step up and be a parent for Ethan while Jim and Tabitha were dealing with their grief. But to have an older Thomas on the other side of the call was definitely not on my Season 3 From bingo card. Even if the twist twist of the show turns out to be time travel, I don't understand how older Thomas is here, given he died when he was an infant. It just doesn't make sense. That's why I believe that this is also another entity that is targeting the Matthews family. Tabitha is the chosen one who has to save the Ghoulish Kids. Julia's had a close call with the music box monster, which has given her a lot of visions, which, although she might not understand, can play a crucial role in solving the mystery. Ethan is super close with Victor, who has been in the town the longest and knows the most about the place. And even though the radio tower was not successful, Jim definitely played a role in bringing everyone in the town together and giving them hope. He did so again when he managed to find food with Kenny near the settlement. So technically speaking, each Matthews family member plays a crucial role in saving the townsfolk. If the evil forces have to take someone out, it makes sense why they would target the Matthews out of the bunch. Since losing Thomas was a life-changing event for the Matthews, it would make total sense if this older Thomas we hear is just crude mockery by the entities at play in the town. The second time Thomas called, he told Ethan about Tabitha's arrival in an ambulance. Sure enough, a few hours later, Tabitha shows up in town in an ambulance. While this might seem like a helpful gesture at first glance, I think the entity is just as sinister as the voice over the radio. By informing Ethan about this, the entity has effectively gained the trust of the young boy, who might come back and bite the Matthews parents on the ass when Ethan blindly believes everything the entity says, posing as older Thomas. Jasper. From the first season, we've gotten sneak peeks at Jasper the dummy. Although at first we assumed this was just another creepy doll that's showing up as a horror trope, in the third season, it's been confirmed that Jasper is in fact a crucial player in the mystery of this place. Victor stated that Christopher, the guy who used to be obsessed with the root symbol, used to use Jasper to make everyone laugh. Victor liked that until Christopher started isolating himself. One day, he went after Christopher and saw Jasper and Christopher getting into an argument. And yes, Jasper was speaking. Victor managed to get back inside the tunnels and get his hands on Jasper. Although he comes super close to the creatures, Victor manages to make a hasty escape with Henry and Jasper. Based on what Victor told Henry about Jasper, it seems like Jasper is the home of an entity, and this entity might just be helpful, unlike the other entities. Victor said that they would have to find a way to make Jasper tell them the story about the township. I don't think that if the entity controlling Jasper had been evil, Victor would have gone this far in saving him. While I may be wrong, I think this entity probably works like the boy in white and only shows up to certain people. While the entity might try to help, the big bad evil in this town might just have the power to override this entity in Jasper, and that could have been the reason why Christopher played a role in the town massacre. While this is speculation on the fans' part, I personally think this theory is rather plausible. Clearly, there is a hierarchy of entities at play here, just like this ever-going battle between good and evil. Since the evil entities feed off of hope, and with all the things happening around town this season, I'd say the evil entities are at their most powerful state. So, while the Jasper entity might help Victor out, I wouldn't be surprised if the evil entities manage to overpower them.
Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong?
Nothing.
The Ghoulish Kids. These kids are definitely one of the key mysterious aspects of the town. The more we learn about these Ghoulish Kids, the more I feel like this is a nod to the ones who walked away from Omelas. These kids seem to have been sacrificed for the sake of appeasing the big bad evil at play here in the town. As long as these kids remain trapped in the tower, the nightmare of this town is never going to end. These kids act as the main power source for the entities. That's perhaps why Miranda and Tabitha were both tasked with saving the kids to save everyone in the town. Since the entities, the good and the bad, clearly show up in front of the ones who can help them or the ones they can exploit, I think we should not brush aside the vision that Jade had in Season 2. I think Jade is also one of the people who chose to save the kids. The symbol that Jade has been obsessing over also coincidentally turned out to be the only thing that kids saw when they were left on the sacrificial beds. So clearly, that symbol is connected to the kids. So now, I'm curious to see how they'll tie up the Ghoulish Kids with the symbol and bring Jade into the picture.
What?
Evil Abby. Everyone in the town has gone through enough trauma since they got trapped here. So when I saw Boyd seeing Father Khatri and Jade seeing Tom, I really believed that these visions were just them hallucinating their close ones. Jade had been smoking up pretty frequently in the first season, and he spent the better part of the second season drunk, so his hallucinations make total sense. Boyd, on the other hand, has Parkinson's, so his hallucinations could be chalked up to that as well. When we first saw Abby in the forest, I genuinely thought it was one of those hallucinations that Boyd was getting. Maybe the big bad evil intentionally made it sound like Sarah was hearing Abby's voice, and that led to Boyd seeing Abby trapped in the spider webs. However, when Abby showed up in the latter half of the second season, I'm pretty sure all of us can agree that she was not a hallucination. She was an apparition, and that too, a malicious one. Whether this was the big bad evil entity posing as Abby is not confirmed yet. However, since we've seen the town take up the memories and the traumas of the ones who have passed away, I wouldn't be surprised if the Abby we saw is the actual spirit of Abby being used as a puppet by the evil entity to break Boyd down. Boyd had to kill the love of his life with his own hands, and he didn't get a moment to catch his breath. The guilt and the trauma of shooting Abby, along with Ellis's hatred towards him, was a huge emotional burden on Boyd. So it makes sense if the entity was making a mockery out of Abby's memories by using her face to say these crooked things. The mysterious helper, the Boogeyman. When Boyd was trapped in the dry well in the dungeons, Martin called out to him. Martin promised to help Boyd if he would help him out in return. Right after that, a rope was thrown at Boyd. A big question that all fans had was who threw Boyd the rope? It couldn't have been Martin because he was shackled to the walls. This is where everyone started thinking of the big bad evil entity or the Boogeyman. We've all seen Victor's paintings of a shadowy figure with red eyes. In the third season, we saw the shadowy figure return, but this time in Miranda's painting. Fans have theorized that maybe this Boogeyman is the one behind all the unexplained things we have seen in the show so far. All the different apparitions, the voice on the radio, older Thomas, everything is the work of the Boogeyman. Given the show has many not-so-subtle nods to Native American folklore, it wouldn't be surprising if the Boogeyman in question is actually referring to the Aikmud Yim and the Idrak. Both of these versions of the Boogeyman are infamous for being around without being seen. They hear everything, they see everything, but no one knows they are there. The Idrak is also known to steal memories, which tracks along with the events in this town. If we follow this theory, then a lot of the supernatural entities mentioned in this list would end up becoming a part of the Boogeyman and his trickery. Bonus edition, The Man in Yellow. A lot of fans noticed the Man in Yellow in Miranda's paintings about FromVille. It just stands out in the entire basement full of paintings, and I think it's for a good reason. Something about this picture seems rather ominous. A lot of fans have been theorizing about this particular entity. Some think he would be a helpful entity, like the boy in white, while others feel like he would be harmful and might just be the entity actually controlling Jasper. Needless to say, there's a lot of speculation going on. I think this man in yellow will be one of the creatures. The reason I say this is because I remember seeing a lot of different creatures in the first and second seasons. However, in comparison, the third season has focused on a handful of creatures who we are seeing over and over again. So maybe the man in yellow would be one of the major creatures introduced this season. In my head, I imagine From in a very game-like fashion. So the creatures were the threat one in level 1. But now that the townsfolk pushed back and Boyd and Sarah went into the forest, the monster upped the ante with threat 2, the music box monster. Level 2 was completed when Boyd smashed the music box. So now they're in level 3, where quite a few interesting supernatural entities, like the Kimono Lady, Jasper, etc., were fleshed out. However, none of them are actually the threat 3. So I feel like maybe this man in yellow is actually that bigger threat who will be introduced this season. Otherwise, showing his painting in the basement would be a waste of Chekhov's gun.
कहाँ जा रहे हो?
Marvelous verdict. From has to be one of my favorite TV shows in recent years. While I know that maybe by the end of this season, we'll find out that one particular entity was behind all the apparitions, I still feel like each of these supernatural entities, apparitions, creatures, and otherwise deserved their own spotlight. Each of these entities has been very well thought out by the showrunners, and they've taken their time to include them. So I suppose you can say this is my way of showing my appreciation for their hard work. I hope you all enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed discussing all of it. Let us know in the comments which supernatural entity you think will play a big role in the 3rd season, and I'll see you guys next time. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.